The bus ride to my parents' house that Thanksgiving was quieter than I expected. I sat by the window, forehead resting lightly against the glass, watching neighborhoods slide past like scenes I'd already outgrown. People around me were half asleep, bundled in coats, scrolling on their phones, heading to dinners filled with expectations they probably hadn't agreed to either. I chose the bus on purpose. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to arrive exactly the way they expected me to. Growing up, I was always labeled the practical one. Not ambitious. Not flashy. Practical. My younger sister, Claire, loved symbols of success. Cars especially. To her, they weren't transportation, they were proof. Proof you'd made it. Proof you mattered. She collected them the way other people collected handbags. I, on the other hand, had never cared much about owning a car. I walked, rode buses, called rides when I needed to. To my parents, this wasn't a preference. It was a failure. My mother had turned it into a quiet disappointment. My father turned it into a joke. Every holiday, every gathering, the same lines resurfaced like clockwork. Remember when you said you'd never need a car? He'd laugh, shaking his head like it was the funniest thing in the world. Still standing by that idea? I always smiled, changed the subject, let them feel like they'd won. There was no point explaining that I didn't need a car when I was building something that moved far beyond roads. By the time I was 23, I had already founded my company. I saw a gap most people ignored. Emergency medical transport that didn't buckle under bureaucracy. Executive aviation that prioritized efficiency over ego. Disaster response that didn't waste precious hours coordinating egos instead of aircraft. I started small. One leased helicopter. A plan nobody took seriously. I thought bigger than they ever imagined. 5 years later, my company operated across multiple continents. Helicopters turned into jets. Jets turned into airlines. Infrastructure followed. Lives were saved. Contracts signed. Governments called. Corporations paid. The valuation crossed into numbers my family wouldn't even believe if they saw them printed. And they didn't know. Not because I was hiding. Because they never asked. The bus dropped me off 2 blocks from my parents' house right on time. I checked my watch. Perfect. As I walked up the familiar street, I saw the driveway already full. Claire's white Tesla. Her red Mercedes. And the black Range Rover she'd bought barely a month ago. 3 cars for one person who lived alone. It was almost impressive how loudly she needed the world to hear her success. The front door opened before I rang the bell. My mother stood there with a smile that stopped just short of warmth. Did the bus run on time? She asked immediately. You know how unreliable public transportation can be. It was fine, Mom. She ushered me inside, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. You really should let your father help you with a down payment on a used car. Something practical. It's embarrassing, sweetheart. You're 30 now. 31, actually. But I let it go. The house smelled like turkey and judgment. Claire was already in the living room, perfectly styled, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting to be photographed. She looked up when I walked in, her lips curling into something between sympathy and superiority. Oh, you made it. Did you have to take 2 buses? I know the routes can be confusing. Just one. Dad emerged from his study with a drink in hand. The transit rider returns, he announced. Claire, did you show your sister the new Range Rover? Top of the line. That's what success looks like. I set my bag down carefully. It's very nice. Nice? Dad laughed. It's $120,000. Meanwhile, you're spending what, $2 a ride? Really putting that education to work. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I worry about you, my mother said, a note of real concern sneaking into her voice. What happens when you need to go somewhere important? Interviews. Meetings. You can't show up on a bus. I managed just fine. Claire leaned closer to Dad and stage whispered, probably too proud to admit she can't afford better. I could afford plenty. I just didn't need to prove it to them. Dinner prep turned into a familiar performance. Claire talked about her cars. My cousins talked about their leases. Every arrival came with keys jingling and brand names announced like achievements. And every few minutes, someone remembered to circle back to me. Do you have to stand the whole way? What about rain? Isn't it dangerous? A woman alone at bus stops? The implication was clear. No car meant no protection. No success. No adulthood. My phone buzzed again. I glanced this time. A message from my operations team. I typed a quick response and slipped it back into my pocket. Always on that phone, my aunt commented. Important business? Just coordinating logistics. For your aviation thing? My uncle asked, lifting his beer. 8 years now. 8 years, he whistled. And still taking the bus. Maybe it's time to admit the business model isn't working. The model works fine. Then why are you still living like a student? Dad asked. No car. No house. Renting a studio. I rent an apartment. A studio, Claire emphasized. In a sketchy neighborhood. Meanwhile, I just closed on a condo downtown. 3 bedrooms. Parking for all my cars. That's great, I said. Mom sighed. We're just worried. We lie awake wondering if you'll be okay. I looked at her. I am okay. How can you say that? You have nothing to show for your life. The kitchen went quiet. I have stability. Where? Dad spread his arms. Show us something real. My phone buzzed again. Urgent this time. I checked my watch. Still on schedule. You'll see soon enough. And that was the moment they all decided I'd finally lost it. They stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. Not curious. Not interested. Concerned in the way people get when they've already decided you're the problem. See what? My father asked, standing up now. What exactly are we supposed to see? I glanced at my watch again. Plenty of time. Just, give it a bit. That was apparently the wrong answer. Claire laughed first, sharp and disbelieving. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. You're doing that thing again, being mysterious so no one can pin you down. You don't have anything to show because there is nothing to show. I'm not being mysterious. Then stop dodging, she snapped. Either you have this big impressive aviation company or you don't. Which is it? I own it. The room erupted. Laughter burst out in waves, louder and meaner this time. My uncle slapped the counter. My cousin doubled over. My father actually laughed so hard he had to steady himself on a chair. You? Claire managed between giggles. You founded a multi-billion-dollar aviation company? That's not just a lie, that's delusional. That kind of wealth would be obvious. My uncle added. You'd have a car. A house. Something. You don't live like someone who owns anything. I have houses. And cars. I just don't use them much. That made it worse. My mother's face shifted from embarrassment to genuine alarm. Honey, maybe you should talk to someone. This level of fantasy isn't healthy. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind that only shows up when you've finally stopped hoping for understanding. I'm not fantasizing. Then prove it, my father demanded. Right now. Show us proof. Bank statements. Contracts. Anything real. I checked my watch again. Still on track. You'll have proof shortly. What does that even mean? Claire stepped toward me, arms crossed. Stop playing games. I'm not playing. Then what are you doing? Waiting. For what? For my fleet to arrive. Silence. Then chaos. Your what? My father said slowly. My fleet. Someone actually gasped. She's lost it, Claire said flatly. She thinks helicopters are coming here. My mother grabbed my arm, her voice soft and scared. It's okay to admit you made this up. We'll help you. We'll get you support. I gently pulled my arm free. I don't need support. I need you to wait. My cousin Marcus stood up. Fine. I'll go outside. When nothing shows up, maybe you'll finally admit this has gone too far. Great idea, I said. We can all go out. The weather's fine. They looked at me like I'd suggested jumping off the roof. You want us to stand outside waiting for imaginary helicopters? Claire asked. 3 helicopters, actually. Dad shook his head. This is insane. Still, curiosity won. One by one, coats were grabbed, muttering followed, and soon we were all standing on the back patio, staring at a perfectly ordinary suburban backyard. Marcus checked his phone. We're really doing this. It's not that cold, I said. That's not the point, Claire snapped. The point is you're embarrassing yourself. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. 7 minutes out. I smiled. What are you smiling about? Mom demanded. Nothing. Dad rubbed his face. We enabled this. We should have stopped this years ago. Then we heard it. A low thrum. Distant. Almost easy to dismiss. What was that? My aunt asked. Probably traffic, Claire said quickly. The sound grew louder. My cousin stopped filming. Wait, that's not helicopters, I said calmly. Dad shook his head. No. No way. The noise intensified, rhythmic and unmistakable now. I don't see anything yet, Marcus said, spinning in place. They're coming from the northeast. And then they appeared. 3 sleek black helicopters crested the tree line, perfectly aligned, sunlight flashing off polished metal. They moved with purpose, controlled and precise, not wandering tourist choppers or news crews. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Claire whispered, no, 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 no. The helicopters descended, rotors whipping the yard into chaos, leaves spiraling, patio furniture rattling. One by one, they touched down exactly where I'd planned, forming a clean triangular formation on the grass. Silence followed as the rotors slowed. Doors opened. Uniformed crew stepped out, efficient, professional, unmistakably real. A man in a crisp flight uniform walked straight toward me and stopped a few feet away. He snapped a salute. Ma'am. Fleet delivered as requested. All systems operational. I returned the salute casually. Thank you, Captain. Excellent timing. Always, ma'am. Behind me, no one spoke. I turned around. They looked like statues. Claire's mouth opened and closed without sound. Dad finally found his voice. This isn't real. It is. You don't own these, he said weakly. I do. My mother sank into a patio chair. Captain Rodriguez waited patiently at my side. Shall we maintain standby or prepare for departure? Standby is fine. I'll need about 20 minutes. Understood. He turned and began issuing commands to his crew like this was any other landing. Because to them, it was. I faced my family again. So. Questions? My cousin dropped his phone. It hit the concrete and shattered. This company, he said. Trans Global Aviation, that's yours? Founded it 8 years ago. Claire shook her head violently. No. No, you can't just say that. We operate in 14 countries. 300 plus aircraft. Emergency medical, executive transport, disaster relief. My mother whispered, but you take the bus. I choose to. Why? Because I don't need to prove anything with a car. Captain Rodriguez returned. Operations needs guidance on the Singapore contract. Proceed as discussed. 95 million over 3 years. Understood. 95 million, my aunt repeated faintly. It's government work. Emergency services. Good partnership. Marcus leaned over and promptly threw up in the bushes. Why didn't you tell us? My mother sobbed. I met her eyes. Because every time I tried, you laughed. Or dismissed it. Or told me to. Get a real job. Claire's voice cracked. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. I turned toward the helicopter again. Captain, I'll need manifest updates. And, pack up the turkey. The turkey? He asked, smiling. Crew's been flying all day. They deserve dinner. Yes, ma'am. You're leaving? Dad asked. I've been here 2 hours. 2 hours of being mocked for not owning a car while owning the sky. I think that's enough. Wait, Jennifer said suddenly. You said you own this house? I smiled. Bought it 3 years ago when the bank was about to foreclose. You're welcome. My father's face drained of color. We've been paying, below market rent, yes. My mother couldn't breathe. This is too much. It is a lot, I agreed. Which is why I don't usually bring it up at family dinners. But you demanded proof. So, proof. I gestured to the helicopters. Satisfied? And for the first time in my life, no one had an answer. Claire was crying openly now. Not quiet tears either. The messy kind that ruin mascara and pride at the same time. She kept shaking her head like if she did it hard enough, the helicopters would disappear and we'd all rewind back to the version of the afternoon where I was still the disappointment. This doesn't make sense, she kept saying. You're younger than me. You were always behind. You don't even drive. I was never behind, I said gently. I just wasn't performing success the way you expected. My father finally sat down, heavily, like his legs had given out under the weight of what he was seeing. For years, he'd measured adulthood in cars, houses, job titles he could brag about. And now all of that had collapsed in front of him in the form of 3 aircraft worth more than everything he owned combined. My mother wiped her face with trembling hands. You could have told us. I tried. No, I mean really told us, she insisted. Made us understand. I shook my head. Understanding requires listening. You never listened. You decided who I was before I ever had a chance to finish a sentence. The crew moved efficiently around us, running checks, communicating through headsets like this backyard wasn't the emotional wreckage of my family's worldview. Captain Rodriguez returned again, professional as ever. Ma'am, we have 3 emergency transport requests waiting. Colorado and British Columbia are time sensitive. Colorado and BC, I said without hesitation. Scotland can wait a couple hours. Check with the Edinburgh base first. Understood. My uncle stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. You make decisions like that, just like that? That's my job. And how many people work for you? My aunt asked quietly. Just over 2,000 globally. She let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. Claire wiped her face. I don't understand how we missed this. You didn't miss it, I said. You ignored it. My father looked up at me, eyes glassy. We thought if you weren't struggling, you'd look like success. I smiled sadly. Success doesn't always want to be looked at. Silence settled over the yard again, broken only by the soft whir of cooling engines. Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat politely. Ma'am, the board would like to schedule a call regarding the acquisition. Tomorrow's Friday. Tell them Monday. I'm taking the weekend. Yes, ma'am. Acquisition? My cousin asked weakly. Amazon's aviation division, I said. Cargo fleet. We're reviewing the numbers. Marcus had finally stopped gagging and just sat on the grass staring at nothing. My mother suddenly stood up. You own this house. Yes. You saved us from foreclosure. 3 years ago. She pressed a hand to her chest like the air had been knocked out of her. All this time, we thought the bank, I structured it so you wouldn't know. I didn't want it thrown back at me every holiday. My father's voice broke. We were paying rent, to you. Below market. You couldn't afford otherwise. Emma, no, Claire, looked up sharply. Why would you do that after how we treated you? I thought about that for a moment. Because despite everything, I still loved you. I just stopped needing your approval. Captain Rodriguez opened the helicopter door for me. Ma'am, we're ready when you are. I stepped closer, then paused and turned back one last time. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came for Thanksgiving. I took the bus because I didn't want to explain my life to people who never believed me in the first place. But you pushed. You demanded proof. So now you have it. My mother took a shaky step forward. Are you coming back? For Christmas? I considered it honestly. That depends. Can we talk without tallying assets? Without comparing me to Claire's cars? Without assuming that different means failed? No one answered. I nodded. I'll take that as a no. I climbed fully into the helicopter. Captain, let's head out. Where to, ma'am? Corporate headquarters. And, pack up the turkey. Crew deserves a proper Thanksgiving. He grinned. Best order I've gotten all day. As the engines powered up, I watched my family one last time. They stood frozen in the yard, their yard, that I owned, staring up at the life they'd insisted couldn't exist. The helicopters lifted smoothly, rising together in perfect formation. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Claire, please come back. Mom, we need to talk. Marcus, that was unreal. Dad, we were wrong. About everything. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted Captain Rodriguez. Change of plans. Take us to Hawaii. 3-day weekend. Full pay. Full benefits. Turkey dinner on the beach. His response came seconds later. Best boss in the sky. I smiled as the neighborhood shrank beneath us. 14 countries. Hundreds of aircraft. Thousands of employees. And not a single car in my name. Because I never needed the road when I owned the sky. Hawaii greeted us with warm air and a sky that felt wide enough to breathe again. The helicopters touched down on sand instead of grass this time, rotors slowing as the ocean stretched endlessly behind them. The crew moved with the same calm precision, but the tension that had followed me all afternoon finally dissolved somewhere over the Pacific. We ate Thanksgiving dinner right there on the beach. Turkey, sweet potatoes, laughter drifting between people who didn't need to measure their worth against anyone else's. Someone played music from a phone. Someone else kicked off their boots and walked straight into the water. Captain Rodriguez raised a glass and thanked me for taking care of them. I told him it was mutual. Leadership, I'd learned, wasn't about control. It was about trust. Later that night, alone on the balcony of the resort I also happened to own, my phone buzzed again. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Family messages have a certain weight to them, even unopened. I thought about my mother's face when she realized I'd saved their home. About my father's voice cracking when the story he'd told himself for years finally collapsed. About Claire standing there, surrounded by cars she'd mistaken for identity, realizing that I'd built something she couldn't park in a driveway. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger either. Mostly, I felt tired. And free. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit. I reviewed reports with coffee in hand, approved a disaster response deployment in Canada, signed off on a medevac expansion in South America. Work moved on, steady and grounded, like it always had. The difference was that no one was questioning whether I belonged at the table. I built the table. Back home, the fallout unfolded without me. Claire didn't post for days. My father called twice and left voicemails that started formal and ended emotional. My mother sent a long message about pride and regret and how she wished she'd asked different questions sooner. I listened to the voicemails. I read the texts. Then I put my phone down. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from distance. From realizing you don't need validation from people who only recognize success when it looks familiar. A week later, I flew back to headquarters. Not in a helicopter this time. A commercial flight. Window seat. No chauffeur waiting. No announcement. Just me, a notebook, and a quiet smile when the plane lifted off. I still take the bus when I feel like it. I still walk. I still choose simplicity where I can. Not because I can't afford more, but because I refuse to let appearances run my life. My family eventually stopped asking about cars. Instead, my mother asked how my health was. My father asked what kind of work made me happiest. Claire didn't say much at all, but when she did, she listened. That was new. And maybe that was the real landing. Not helicopters in a backyard. Not billion-dollar valuations. But the moment they finally realized that success doesn't always announce itself with keys and engines and noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Like a woman stepping off a bus, carrying everything she needs inside her. By the time winter settled in for real, the story had already stopped feeling like something that belonged to my family at all. It had folded itself into the background of my life, like an old scar you only notice when someone else points it out. The helicopters were back to being just tools. The contracts were just contracts. The work was just work. And that, oddly enough, was exactly how I liked it. My parents tried, in their own awkward way. They invited me for dinner without an agenda. No comparisons. No helpful suggestions. No jokes about buses or cars. The first time my dad caught himself starting one, he stopped mid-sentence and cleared his throat. That moment mattered more to me than any apology speech could have. Claire struggled the most. Losing the narrative she'd lived inside for years wasn't graceful for her. When your identity is built on being the successful one, it's destabilizing to realize success doesn't belong to you by default. But she stopped mocking. Then she stopped competing. Eventually, she started asking questions that weren't traps. What do you actually like about what you do? What does a normal day look like for you? Those questions felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. I never brought up the helicopters again. I never used that moment as leverage. I didn't need to. Reality had already done the work for me. What surprised me most was how little I needed them to understand everything. I didn't need my parents to recite my company stats. I didn't need Claire to admit she'd been wrong. I just needed the space to exist without being reduced to a punchline. And I finally had that. Every now and then, someone new would hear the story secondhand. A cousin would ask quietly if it was really true. A neighbor would look at me differently after learning who owned the house. I answered politely and changed the subject. My life wasn't a spectacle anymore. It was just mine. I still take the bus sometimes. I like watching cities wake up. I like being invisible when I choose to be. There's power in that kind of freedom, the kind you don't have to announce. Owning the sky taught me something simple but lasting. The loudest people in your life are not always the ones who know you best. And the people who underestimate you are often just revealing the limits of their own imagination. If there's anything I took away from that Thanksgiving, it's this. You don't owe anyone a performance of success. You don't need props to validate your choices. And you don't have to correct every person who gets you wrong. Sometimes the most satisfying thing you can do is build quietly, choose intentionally, and let the truth arrive on its own schedule. Mine arrived with rotor blades and disbelief. Yours might arrive differently. But when it does, I hope you're standing exactly where you want to be.